You're alone. Not romantically alone, not single and scrolling alone, actually alone. It's maybe 40,000 years ago. The light is dying fast because it always does in winter, and the rest of your group went over the ridge 3 days ago to follow a herd, and you got separated. No fire tonight because you couldn't get one going by yourself. No voices, no smell of someone else's sweat, no snoring, no argument about who ate the last of the marrow. Just you, the cold coming up through the ground, and a silence so total you can hear your own blood moving. And here's the thing modern people never quite believe when they hear it. That silence wasn't just sad. It was, statistically, a countdown. Because here's the claim that's going to sound insane and is completely true. Loneliness is not a modern invention. It's not a side effect of apartments and doom scrolling and moving away from your hometown for a job. Loneliness is older than language. It's older than fire. Some researchers think it's older than our species. It's a 5-alarm biological warning system that evolved for one brutal reason. For almost the entire span of human existence, being alone didn't mean you missed a group chat.
It meant you were about to die. And the terrifying part is that the alarm still works exactly as well today as it did 40,000 years ago. It's just that nobody's coming when it goes off anymore. Let's get some numbers into your head, because this is where it stops being a vibe and starts being biology. Anthropologists estimate that for most of the Paleolithic, that's the Old Stone Age, the roughly 2.5 million year stretch before farming showed up, humans lived in bands of somewhere around 25 to 50 people. Not a city, not even a small town, fewer people than fit in a single subway car. And the oft-cited Dunbar's number, 150, proposed by anthropologist Robin Dunbar, is the theoretical cap on how many relationships a human brain can meaningfully track at all. Everyone beyond that becomes a stranger with a name. So picture your entire social universe, every person who has ever mattered to you, capped at roughly the population of a large wedding. That was the whole world. Losing 3 or 4 people from that wasn't an inconvenience. It was losing 10% of your species as far as you personally were concerned. Now translate that into stakes. A modern human alone in the woods overnight is uncomfortable, maybe a little scared, and has a great story for brunch.
A Paleolithic human alone overnight had no group to watch for predators while they slept, no one to help carry an injury, no one to share body heat in weather that could kill you in hours, and no one to help process food fast enough before it spoiled or somebody else took it. Solo survival rates for early humans without support networks were grim enough that some researchers argue solitary confinement, as a Paleolithic hunter-gatherer, not as a modern prisoner, was functionally closer to a death sentence than to a bad mood. Loneliness didn't feel bad because ancient humans were fragile or dramatic. It felt bad on purpose. Pain is how a body says, "Fix this now," and evolution decided that being cut off from your group deserved the same volume of alarm as touching fire. Here's where it gets genuinely strange, though, and where the story stops being about hunting mammoths and starts being about something closer to home. Neuroscientists studying social pain, being excluded, ignored, left out, have found it activates some of the same regions of the brain as physical pain does, particularly a region called the anterior cingulate cortex. In one well-known study, researchers had people play a simple ball-tossing game where they were gradually and deliberately excluded by other players, and the brain scans lit up in ways that looked a lot like someone had just been physically hurt.
Getting ghosted, in other words, is not a metaphorically painful experience. It is, neurologically, an actually painful one, running on hardware built for a world where exclusion from the group had a body count. And this is where you start seeing loneliness show up in the dirt, literally in the archaeological record, not as a feeling, but as evidence of what humans did to avoid it. Take Shanidar Cave in northern Iraq, where archaeologists found the remains of a Neanderthal, referred to as Shanidar I, who lived roughly 45,000 to 50,000 years ago. This individual had a withered arm, likely blind in one eye, with injuries so severe he almost certainly couldn't hunt, couldn't climb, and would have struggled to feed himself. And yet the skeleton shows he lived for years after those injuries. Someone fed him, someone kept him warm, someone decided that a person who could contribute nothing physically was still worth keeping in the circle. That's not sentimentality, or at least not only sentimentality. It's a species that had already figured out, deep in its bones, that the group was the actual survival tool, more important than any single spear or fire.
Losing a member wasn't just an emotional loss, it was capital destruction, which raises an obvious, slightly uncomfortable question. If being with the group mattered that much, how did anyone stand it? 25 to 50 people, no doors, no privacy, sharing a cave with someone's snoring uncle for your entire natural life. That sounds less like paradise and more like the world's longest camping trip with people you didn't choose. And the answer is that ancient humans built an entire technology stack just to manage that. Grooming, the physical kind, picking through fur and hair, is one of the oldest bonding behaviors we know of in primates. And Dunbar's research suggests that as human groups got too big for everyone to physically groom everyone else, gossip evolved to do the same job at scale. Talking about who did what to whom is, evolutionarily speaking, doing someone's hair with your mouth. Language, in this theory, wasn't invented to talk about mammoths. It was invented so more people could be told, at once, you belong here, without anyone having to physically pick lice out of anyone's scalp for 6 hours a day. Somewhere, a Paleolithic teenager was rolling their eyes at their group's version of small talk, and it was, unknown to them, one of the load-bearing walls of civilization.
Here's a scale check, because 2.5 million years doesn't mean anything to a brain built to understand an afternoon. If you compressed the entire timeline of the genus Homo into a single 24-hour day, agriculture, farming, permanent settlements, the entire concept of owning land doesn't show up until about 11:56 p.m. Cities, writing, everything you'd recognize as history with names and dates happens in the last 2 minutes, which means for roughly 23 hours and 54 minutes of the human day, there was no privacy, no solitude as a lifestyle choice, and no concept of "I need some me time." There was only the group and the terror of not being in it. Solitude as something to seek out on purpose is an incredibly recent luxury, and your nervous system did not get the memo. This is also, weirdly, where death comes in, and not in the way you'd expect. Losing someone in a group of 30 isn't like losing a coworker in a company of 10,000. It's a structural collapse. Some anthropologists studying grief in small-scale societies today, still living hunter-gatherer groups like the Hadza in Tanzania, or historically studied groups like the Kung of the Kalahari, note that death rituals in tight-knit bands often involve extended, intensely physical mourning, wailing, touching the body, communal proximity, because the loss isn't private, it's everyone's problem. If your group has 40 people and you lose one, you haven't just lost a friend, you've lost roughly 2.5% of your entire species' worth of relationships, expertise, and childcare capacity. And the whole group needs to physically process that together, or the social structure genuinely destabilizes. Grief, like loneliness, wasn't a personal inconvenience to manage quietly. It was a group emergency with a group-sized response. Which finally brings us to a story that isn't Paleolithic at all, but that shows you exactly what this ancient alarm system looks like when it's still ringing and the world it was built for is simply gone.
In August 1911, a man walked out of the foothills near Oroville, California, starving, alone, and terrified, having spent months hiding from the modern world. His name, eventually given to him by anthropologists because he refused to say his own, speaking it was taboo without another Yahi present to say it back, was Ishi. He was the last known member of the Yahi people, a group that had been hunted, starved, and killed off over decades of violence in the wake of the California gold rush, until by his 40s there was no one left. Not a village, not a family, not one other living person who spoke his language, knew his songs, or remembered the world he came from. He spent his final years living at a museum in San Francisco, working with anthropologists Alfred Kroeber and Thomas Waterman, teaching them how to start fires and knap obsidian and hunt the way his people had for generations, passing on an entire culture to strangers because there was no one left inside it to pass it on to. He died in 1916. And here's the detail that should sit with you. Ishi wasn't lonely because he lacked people who liked him. The museum staff, by most accounts, cared for him deeply.
He was lonely in the oldest, deepest sense that alarm system was built to detect. He was the last of his group. The band was gone, and no amount of kindness from outside it could turn the volume down, because that alarm was never designed to be soothed by strangers. It was designed to be soothed by your people, specifically. And when they're gone, it just keeps ringing. That's the part modern life gets so wrong about loneliness, and it's the part worth sitting with for a second. You can be surrounded by people, coworkers, roommates, a phone full of contacts, and still trip the ancient alarm, because the alarm isn't counting bodies in the room. It's checking for something much older and much harder to fake. Does this group know me, specifically, the way a band of 30 knew every single member's face, voice, injuries, and jokes? 100 acquaintances do not soothe an alarm built to recognize the particular smell of your actual tribe. This is probably why loneliness researchers today, people like the late Dr.
John Cacioppo, found that perceived isolation, not the actual number of people around you, but whether you feel known by them, is what predicts stress hormones and even cardiovascular health, more than how many friends you technically have listed anywhere. Your body isn't counting contact, it's still checking for the fire. So go back to that ridge, that cold night, 40,000 years ago. The person who got separated from their group with no fire and no voices and just their own blood moving in the silence. That fear wasn't weakness, it wasn't an overreaction. It was the single most useful emotion a human being could have, because it's the exact feeling that sent people scrambling back over hills, calling out into the dark, choosing the exhausting, noisy, occasionally infuriating work of staying close to other humans, instead of drifting off alone to be more comfortable for an evening. Every person you've ever loved is, in a very real sense, descended from ancestors who found being alone unbearable enough to do something about it. The ache isn't a bug. It's the oldest, most successful piece of software the species ever ran, and it's still running in you right now, checking, quietly, whether your fire has enough people around it. So here's the question, and I actually want an answer in the comments. When's the last time you felt like Ishi in a room full of people, surrounded but not known?
Tell me, someone else reading this probably felt it this week too.